All right, so let's talk about updates. For pretty much any technology out there, updates are just part of the deal. But what happens when you've got a decentralized network, like a blockchain? I mean, there's no CEO, no central team pushing out patches, so how do they evolve? That's what we're diving into today. The two main ways these networks change their own rules, known as hard forks and soft forks.
And that really is the million-dollar question, right? If there's no boss, how on earth does a whole network of people agree to change the rules? Well, the answer comes down to this idea called forking. It's basically the process for updating a blockchain's protocol, its core rulebook.
Okay, to get our heads around this, let's use a super simple analogy. Imagine a blockchain's code is like the story in a book that everyone in the network is reading together at the same time. Now, what if the community decides, hey, this story needs a change? Well, they've basically got two options for how to do it.
And this right here, this is the perfect way to picture the difference. Think of a hard fork as writing a whole new chapter. A total rewrite that could completely change the plot. A soft fork, though, that's more like a subtle edit. You're just tweaking an existing chapter, maybe fixing a typo or adding a bit of detail, but the main story stays exactly the same.
Okay, so let's dig into the first one. We're going to start with the more dramatic option, the hard fork. And just like we said, this is like the community deciding to write a brand new, completely different story.
So what is a hard fork, really? It's a software upgrade that's so big, so fundamental, that the new rules are totally incompatible with the old ones. It's a one-way street. Once that new chapter is written, you can't go back and read the old version. It just doesn't work anymore. It's basically invalid.
And yeah, this has some huge implications. First off, it's not backward compatible. That means everyone, and I mean every single user, every miner, the whole shebang, they have to upgrade. There's no choice if you want to stay on the network. And if a big chunk of the community doesn't agree, well, that's when you get a permanent split. The chain literally forks into two, creating two separate blockchains and two separate currencies, all running at the same time.
All right, now let's flip to the other side of the coin. The second way to do this is a lot less disruptive. It's called a soft fork. And if a hard fork is a dramatic news story, this one is much, much gentler. It's just a light edit.
The absolute key feature here, the one thing you need to remember, is backward compatibility. With a soft fork, the new rules are designed to still work with the old ones. It's kind of like adding a footnote or fixing a small typo in our book. Even if you're reading an older copy without the edit, you can still follow along with the main story just fine.
And because it's backward compatible, upgrading becomes optional for most people. See, nodes that don't upgrade can still participate, they can still validate transactions, they just might not understand the fancy new features. The really important thing to get here is that a soft fork lets you add new rules without breaking the old ones, and that avoids forcing the entire network to split in two.
So, okay, we've got the what and the how down, but that just leads to the biggest question of all, the why. Why would a community risk a major split, or even just push a small update? What's the motivation? Well, it turns out there are a few really common reasons. First up, you've got your standard planned upgrades. The community gets together and agrees, hey, let's add some cool new features. Pretty straightforward. Then you have the more dramatic stuff, deep, fundamental disagreements about where the project should go. Sometimes a fork is actually a rescue mission, a desperate move to fix something that went horribly wrong, like a major hack. And finally, sometimes people just fork the code to create a brand new coin from scratch. Theory is one thing. But this stuff gets really interesting when you see it play out in the real world. So let's look at probably the most famous example out there, the Bitcoin split. This story shows you just how high the stakes can get when a community really, truly disagrees.
Okay, picture this. The year is 2017. The Bitcoin community is in the middle of a full-blown crisis. See, the network had gotten so popular that transactions were getting super slow and really expensive. And the community? They were completely and totally divided on how to fix the problem.
And what's so fascinating is that this huge, complex, technical debate, it all came down to one single issue, the block size. On one side, you had the camp that wanted to keep Bitcoin small, 1 megabyte blocks. Their argument was that this was absolutely essential for security and keeping the network decentralized. But on the other side, you had a group pushing to increase the block size all the way to 8 megabytes. Their goal? To process way more transactions, which would boost speed and slash those pesky fees.
And guess what? Neither side was willing to back down, not an inch. Since they just couldn't find a compromise, the Bigger Blocks team decided to pull the trigger on a hard fork. And just like that, the chain split. A brand new cryptocurrency Bitcoin Cash, or BCH, was born. And from that day forward, it existed right alongside the original Bitcoin, BTC.
And this whole Bitcoin story really brings us to the core dilemma of forking. It's this constant tug-of-war between progress and unity. Every single time a fork is proposed, it forces the community to ask a really tough question. Do we push for this new change, or is it more important to keep everyone together?
This quote really just nails the whole thing. If a fork goes well, it can be a massive win. It can solve huge problems and bring in a ton of new attention and investment. But, and this is a big but, if it's handled badly, if it gets too nasty, it can completely fracture the community. It can even kill the project.
At the end of the day, this is the central challenge of running something without a boss. Forks are the only real tool these networks have to evolve, but they always come with the risk of splitting people apart. It's this powerful and, yes, sometimes really messy balancing act between moving forward and making sure everyone's on board.
Which kind of leaves us with this one big, fascinating question to chew on. Is this ability to fork, this power to just split and go a totally different way when people disagree, is that a fundamental weakness, a huge risk to stability? Or is it actually the greatest strength of these systems? Is it the ultimate feature that guarantees no single group can ever take control and ensures that the best ideas, well, they always have a fighting chance to survive? Definitely something to think about.